right, welcome to another episode of the Endurance Matters podcast. I've got in studio today Sam Appleton. Sam, welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here. Good we could record in person. I guess that's the beauty of being in Boulder. It's like everyone's here, so you've got good access to a lot of guests.
Yeah, absolutely. I said to myself I had to save some good guests for 2025. I couldn't knock them all out in 2024. So this is actually our first recording of 2025. So very exciting to kick off the year interviewing Sam. The listeners will know that I start off the podcast with a hard-hitting icebreaker question. So I'm going to go for it. If you had to choose one nickname to follow you for the rest of your career, what would you choose? The options are Sam the Appaconda, Sam Apple Bottom Jeans, or Sam How About Them Apples?
I think I've had like some variation of those my whole life. I mean, that Appaconda one is quite interesting. It's that a few select people call me that, especially back in Australia. It's a little bit crude, but maybe we won't go into details.
Yeah.
On that, but yeah, that's maybe that one because it's the Appaconda.
All right. If I ever get the chance to do the Ironman broadcast and you lead out the water, I'm going to say, here comes Appaconda.
yeah.
Smashing it.
I think you can. I think I've explained the story on another podcast. So if listeners are intrigued, they can dig into the archives of my podcast history and maybe find the story to that one.
All right, cool. Maybe we'll put it in the show notes. All right, cool. Well, I want to rewind a little bit. Like, why don't you start off by telling me how you got into triathlon and sort of your background?
Yeah, so I grew up in Sydney, and I'm one of four boys. So I got three brothers, and we were all just kind of thrown in a swimming pool when we were young to learn how to swim. I think it's very common in Australia, a lot of, living by the beach and things like that, like just learning to swim and being in the water is just a way of life. And me and all my brothers kind of gravitated towards competitive swimming. So yeah, lots of, growing up, lots of early starts, knocking out 3 or 4, 5K before school, me and all my brothers. And I think that just kind of led into a really active childhood for me. I played a lot of soccer growing up. I did little athletics through school and things like that. Always was out running. And then I just found a good little community of friends kind of through my teenage years. And that kind of led me to triathlon. And I never really was like growing up, I want to be a triathlete. It's like... it was such a young sport back then when I was growing up in the 90s, early 2000s. And I think just one door led to another. And now I'm 34 living in the USA. And I don't think anybody could have predicted that. But here we are.
Yeah, absolutely. When did you, I guess like this is probably a bit of a fast forward, but when did you decide that, okay, you're going to commit to triathlon and come over to the US?
So through high school, I kind of did a lot of short course racing, some ITU stuff. I was in a talent ID program, but I got really burnt out from that. It's just, we didn't, the coaching staff and things I found a little bit abrasive and abusive almost. And I kind of bounced off that after a couple of years and I actually took a complete break from triathlon probably when I was about 21, 22. I just completely stopped for probably about 12 months. And I went to university, I started studying. And then, after about a year, I was just like, this isn't really what I want to do. And I felt the pull back to triathlon, but never the pull back to that short stuff. So we had a pretty good triathlon group where I lived. The Panthers Tri Club was a really pretty good group of guys that were all doing Ironman and 70.3 and stuff. And I kind of fell into that crowd and started training and did, a bit of longer stuff. And I think I did my first 70.3 in 2012. And I think I got 4th place. I think Pete Jacobs won. And I remember Luke McKenzie, I think, got 2nd. And I mean, I was kind of hooked from there. I was like, that was really fun. And I felt like I was racing for myself. And then in 2013, I think I had my first 70.3 win. And then, just kind of kept going through. And then in 2015, I decided I wanted to come over to the US and kind of chase the international scene a little bit. It's very common for Australians to do their domestic season when it's winter here, summer in Australia, and then come over and race in the US. And I did that in 2015 and then pretty quickly met Sarah, my wife, and yeah, that was kind of it, and I've been here ever since. So yeah, coming up on 10 years here in the US. But yeah, I mean, that's the story of how I kind of came to live in the US. But yeah, it's just still continued racing. I love still going back home to Australia and racing as often as possible. But yeah, Boulder's a great spot, especially for that's a reason why so many people live here and train out of here. It's so easy to do our job day in, day out. Trails and swimming pools and great cycling routes and things like that. So yeah, it's a great spot.
Yeah, absolutely. I know because you came over here kind of a similar time that I landed in Boulder. So we were kind of like, in similar circles, see each other at the pool or whatever. I know like when you first got here, it seemed as though there were a lot of Australians here. And were you living in a house with a bunch of Australians when you first got here? Like Callum and those guys?
No, I wasn't. But yeah, we were definitely like every day we were hanging out together. I think, I think there was Callum Millward, Tim Burkle, and then Glenn was like a photographer that would come and capture content for us. And yeah, we were like thick as thieves. We'd be at Whole Foods every night for dinner and just eating from that hot bar and things like that. The old glory days. But no, I lived actually with a couple in the triathlon club, in Boulder Tri Club, called Pam and Warren Shuckies. They actually have hosted quite a few people. I think Jeannie knows them quite well. And yeah, they really opened their house to me, and I lived there for probably 6 months until I was like, I probably should get my own place now. And but yeah, they were like my adopted American mum and dad. They were great. But yeah, I mean, as much as I loved hanging out with those other guys from Australia, I think it was good to also not be with them 24/7. Like we'd train all day together, go out to dinner together, and then it was kind of nice to be able to, have a bit of time away before we all rekindled the next day.
Yeah, if anyone wants to go back and watch some of those like Cupcakes with Cal interviews and some of the content from like now it's back in the day. It doesn't feel like that long ago. It's 10 years ago now.
It's 10 years ago.
Which is crazy.
Yeah. It was like Callum was almost like the trailblazer for the triathlon YouTube and things like that. I think if that started now, it would probably take off a lot more than it actually did. Like Callum had great success and things like that. But yeah, he almost pioneered the old YouTube channel for triathletes, just not in the traditional way. But yeah, you should go back and all the listeners go back and watch some of those Cupcakes with Cal. They're great.
Yeah. During that time, how much was it just messing around with those guys in training, and versus how much of it was like super serious? Okay, we're buckling down and actually getting after it.
There was, we like to have fun, but we also knew that we were there to train and perform and things like that. And I think there was a good compromise there. Like we were also, had our own separate programs and things, but we would change a little bit here and there. But yeah, generally, we'd go out, we'd do our long runs together, long rides and things like that. But if we had serious specific training, we'd probably be doing it by ourselves, or try and sway the other person to do our session and they'd be swaying me to do theirs. And if we could come to a compromise, then that's good. But yeah, I think now in 2025, it's very much like this is my session, this is what I'm doing. I don't think there's much room for too many compromises with training anymore, unless you're going out for an easy long ride or an easy long run. But yeah, I know for me these days, like I'm not changing my sessions if I've got a specific something that I need to nail. So yeah, I mean, I think it has changed a little bit in that respect, but I think that's also just the sport has evolved so much, and everyone has gotten so good. Everyone has gotten so good at knowing what works for them and what's going to put them in the best position to perform. So I think, yeah, not many people are as willing to compromise these days, which, has its drawbacks, of course. But yeah, I'm a bit of a lone wolf these days with training anyway. I've got a toddler and things, so I'm just kind of training, fitting it in when I can. So I don't mind too much doing the solo stuff.
Sure. I want to definitely circle back on some of the specific training of what you've done in the past and what you feel like you're doing now. But I definitely want to focus on one period of your career in particular before we move on to sort of like the present time. You mentioned how you got fourth in your first professional triathlon, shortly thereafter won your first professional race, which isn't very common. I feel like a lot of athletes take many races to sort of get their feet under them. It felt like you kind of burst on the scene, and then from 2015 to 2019, you had 15 70.3 wins. What was that time like for you?
I mean, it sounds kind of crazy these days. Like, Yeah, I think I had a couple of good years there where I was just kind of firing on all cylinders and I was just training really well. I was loving racing, loving training. I was just in a really good spot and I was having great success. And I think, the sport now is quite a bit more competitive. I'm not saying that I won easy races back then, but I think now the depth of fields at every single race is a lot deeper than it was. You were counting off races, 8, 9, 10 years ago where the sport was quite young. And I was fortunate. I was kind of, firing on all cylinders for those years. But now it's a lot more competitive. It's a lot deeper. If you're not, bringing your A game to these races, you're out the back these days. And it's great to see because I think it's pushed everyone to improve, and you've seen that across the board. Like, look at guys in Kona now going 7:30 odd. I remember Pete Jacobs famously said he was going to go 7:30 at Kona, and he was laughed out of the room.
Yeah,
and Pete wasn't the one to do it, but it just goes to show like how much the sport has evolved. Like at Kona this year, I think I did 8:05 or 8:08. What did I do? And I think Sebi Kinlay won in 2014 in like 8:14 or something. And I was 22nd. So I mean, it was a different time back then, and I think it was great. I was kind of making hay while the sun was shining, I think, a little bit. But it's definitely a lot harder these days. Not many people are going out and winning 4, 5, 6, 70.3s in a year. Like I think one of the years I had 5 wins, which was unbelievable. But I don't think many people are doing that these days.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. It's definitely a lot more difficult. One other point that I had written down for yourself, head on over to
podium when I feel like I was
code BigMetz
towards that top echelon of the 70.3 racing. Like there is a bit of regret. But I also had really great races at those 70.3s, and there's not much more that I think I could have done. My biggest regret, I think, was Chattanooga 70.3, where Ben Canute and Javier Gomez swam off the front, and I didn't let them go, but I didn't swim with them, which is something, I think I was a bit complacent, and I ended up riding in that run group and then had a really good run and finished 4th. I think that was probably my best chance at a 70.3 podium. And then, I just think, like I said, the sport's just changed so much. You can't have a weakness anymore. Everybody now is swimming, biking and running like so well. Like, back when I, early or the mid 2000 teens there, you could get away with having a weakness or something and still be on the podium or be competitive. But now it's just like you need to swim in that front 5, 6, 7 guys. You need to be, riding. You can't have a weakness at all, and you need to be one of the best runners in the sport. So, I mean, it is exciting how the sport has changed so much. But it's kind of definitely made it a lot tougher to make those top 10s at 70.3s and win, a non-championship 70.3. It's like you can't go there and just expect to be on the podium these days. Like everyone is really good, and there's such depth throughout all the races.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. In reflection, let's say, for example, in Chattanooga, you would have come 3rd or come 2nd or won the race. I guess winning changes things, but do you feel like if you were one spot more and gotten 3rd, that would have changed anything for you today?
I don't think so. No, I mean, I might not have that kind of nagging little thing in the back of my head that I had for a couple of years, but I don't think, maybe a little bit financially or sponsorship wise, but my sponsors have been pretty solid with me throughout my whole career. I haven't had too many changes. I don't think there would have been too much disruption on that front. So
yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, I definitely want to talk a little bit more about your training and kind of racing and maybe some performance-specific questions. You mentioned that you've got a little boy now. Mm-hmm. How much of your life revolves around his schedule versus how much autonomy do you have to just like do what you want to do in training?
Everything revolves around him. No, we've got a great support network here, and my wife, she's really invested in triathlon as well, and she loves to see me succeed. But I think it's just given me a little bit more I just have to be better planned, you know.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Like this morning, I woke up at 5:30 because I had to do 2.5 hours on the trainer before I dropped him at daycare, and then I had to do a run session before I came here. And it just requires a little bit more structure to your day, which is fine, and a little bit more planning. But you know, there's added challenges, I think, when you're in heavy training and you know you've just finished a big 25, 28 hour Ironman training week, and then you've got to be on dad duty on Sunday afternoon. That can be the hardest part, I think. But yeah, I wouldn't change anything. You bring so much joy to our lives, and it's kind of nice. It's not all about me anymore, which is it's kind of nice. I've got somebody else to provide for, and I actually really enjoy being a dad. So there's no regrets, nothing I would change at all.
Yeah, does it give you like an extra layer of motivation in your training when you are out there kind of putting in the hours, or when you're on the race course knowing that like, okay, we got to pay for diapers and pay for food?
I guess a little bit. Actually I was doing, when I was racing Ironman Canada last year, I remember on the bike, Ironman bike's a long way, and it was one of those time trial starts. So we were, there was no group dynamics or anything, and I remember just like drifting, and I was probably about 100K into the ride, like halfway through or something. I was just like, I wonder what Toby's doing right now. Hope he's having a good day. And I'm just like daydreaming, and then but I thought that was quite funny.
Yeah, that is funny. Sponsor of today's episode, Precision Fuel and Hydration. These guys have been an amazing partner for the show, and it's really a product that I use every single day in my training to help me go faster, feel better. So in today's day and age, we all know high carb is sort of the thing. And so previously I've spoken about how much I like the chews, and I'm still munching on those pretty much every single day in training, but I've really been getting into the PF90 gels. That's been a really big value add for me to have 3 gels in one. And I feel like sometimes I'll just take that entire gel all at once or go half and half. It just allows me to get a little bit more carbohydrate and sort of just bump everything up and feel a little bit better in training. So if you want to try that for yourself, head on over to pfnh.com and use code BigMetz2025 for 15% off. Looking back on maybe the early portions of your career, like when you first got to Colorado, like what is one thing that you were doing back then that just totally wouldn't be able to happen now? Whether that's because of, you're on, you're a little bit older now, or you've got a son and a family. Like, can you think of anything like that?
Yeah, I guess, just not being, like I touched on it a bit earlier, like I don't have the luxury now of, just being able to train whenever I want. Like I've got certain windows each day that I have to fit my training in, and, I swim at the YMCA a lot with you guys, and, they've got a daycare there, and I bring Toby with me to the pool, and he goes to the daycare, and I bang out 4 or 5K or something, and then go pick him up. So yeah, there's definitely things like now a lot of it is just more structured. Like I'm not like, I'll ride whenever I feel like it, or I'll run whenever I feel like it. Now it's like, all right, Toby's napping. I've got 2 hours. I've got to do a run session, get it done while he's napping, and hopefully he doesn't wake up.
Yeah. In some ways it's better though. Like, I mean, I don't have a child, but I feel like now with age, you pick up more responsibility across the board. Yeah. So you do have to have a bit of that.
It's definitely adds a layer of complexity, but yeah, like I said, I've kind of enjoyed complicating my life in that respect, kind of juggling some extra balls, so to speak. It's, just I'd rather be too busy than not busy enough.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, I feel like you almost are more present in your training when you have only 2 hours to focus on it.
Yeah, exactly. And you have to make it count as well. And you can't just procrastinate, which I would often do. Like, I mean, this will answer your question. I used to drive to the pool and just sit on pool deck for 30 minutes trying to muster up the motivation to get in the pool. But now I drive there, I'm like, I got to bang out 4K in an hour and get home.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I mean, I've at least found that I enjoy my training a lot more now that I'm like a lot busier, because I'm like, okay, well, I only have 3 hours to ride, and I've got a bunch of other stuff in the rest of my day. I'm really going to enjoy this 3 hours. It's more of like an outlet now, whereas before it was maybe a bit of a chore. So, I want to get into a little bit more about like your training specific stuff. Are you still getting coached by Tim?
Yep, still with Tim. So I actually started my long course career with Tim when in 2012, I think I started getting coached by Tim, and he was obviously having great success at 70.3s as well. And I think it got to when I was here in Colorado, 2015, he actually called me up and he's like, I just don't think I can coach you anymore because, he almost did his job too well. Like I was beating him at races and things. And I think that was a hard, definitely a conflict of interest for him. Like he was racing at the top of his game. I was racing at the top of my game. And I was, actively taking prize money. Like he was investing in me, which was then, in performances or in races, taking away from his prize money and things like that. Sure. So there was definitely a conflict of interest there. So I went to Matt Dixon in 2015. Sorry if I'm jumping ahead. You're probably going to get there. And then I was with Matt for about 5 years. And that was really good. Like Matt was really, really great. And he, taught me and built the athlete that I am today. And then I just wanted a bit of a change because I knew, I was now in my 30s, early 30s, and I kind of wanted a bit of a change for the last, push in my career. And Tim was kind of winding down his training and he wanted to bring me back on. So, it's almost come full circle from when we started to then, going away to Matt and then coming back to Tim. So it's quite a cool little story.
When you came back to Tim, did you feel like you had a certain level of commitment to him? Like, okay, I'm going to be coached by Tim for the rest of my career? Or did you go in with a trial? Like, okay, let's try again and see if it works.
I guess not a commitment that I'd be with him until I finish my career, but I know like Tim is one of my best friends. He was actually the best man at our wedding. And I think he knows me personally probably better than anyone. And I think that is invaluable in a coach-athlete relationship. Like writing a program for someone is only part of the puzzle, isn't it? Like it's not too difficult for a coach to write an athlete a program, but understanding, emotions, thoughts, and who I am as a person, I think is much more important. So that was a really big thing for me. And I think Tim and I are similar athletes and similar people as well. So he kind of understands everything, if I'm going through some emotional stuff, or he also had a young family kind of at a similar age to me. So he understands what it's like to juggle, family life, training, and trying to be the best athlete you can be.
Do you think there's potentially like just something cultural about you both being Australian, or do you think that doesn't have any impact?
I think there is maybe something cultural there, but I just feel like Tim understands me best, and I think his programming is really, really good. And we kind of, when I went to Tim, it was almost like I'm going to Tim to pursue Ironman. And I think Tim has made a lot of mistakes in his Ironman career that, he knows how to avoid, or, maybe not how to avoid, but he knows for him, because we're such similar athletes, like what worked for him, what didn't, and he can implement that into my program.
What was the main differences that you saw in his training that he was prescribing pre-Dixon versus when you started up with him again post-Dixon?
It's a little bit different because I was focusing on 70.3s when I was with Tim originally, and the shift to Ironman obviously requires quite a bit more volume. But the sport's just come so far in that 10 years that, has gone past. And I think Tim now, well, just not Tim, but everybody is so much more equipped to how to train athletes for best performance and things like that. So, we weren't doing too much zones or a very basic, zone structure or something. It wasn't like, we're going to go, like now it's like you're going to go for a 4-hour ride and you're going to ride between, 210 and 230 watts. Like It was kind of just like, you're going to ride in zone 2. What's zone 2? I don't know. Just like not easy, but not hard. you know? I think the science, excuse me, sorry. I think the science has come a long way, and that has obviously shifted the plan a little bit as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You've previously spoken a little bit about like you and Tim, being similar athletes, and just in personal conversations, you've mentioned to me that you're not a guy who goes like, multiple 30-hour weeks in a row. Mm-hmm. Like, is that something that you've tried and failed at? Is it something that doesn't work with your lifestyle? Like, what do you have to say about that?
I think a couple of things. I have tried higher volume. It just doesn't agree with my body. I tend to break down. I tend not to enjoy it too much. I was actually trying, kind of this time last year, actually, I was trying big training, and it was pretty evident after doing it for like 4 to 5 weeks that I just wasn't absorbing it. Like the training quality just wasn't there. Like the volume was there, but I was feeling bad. I was getting run down. I was having a lot of niggles and things like that. And the body just, the training quality, just wasn't there. The volume was. And then we actually, and this was before Ironman Australia, kind of like 8 weeks before, or maybe even closer to the race. And I just felt like it wasn't clicking. And then Tim called me and was like, look, I want you to trust me. He stripped out a lot of kind of the junk. Like I was still doing, between 23 and 26 hours a week. So it wasn't nothing. But I wasn't getting close to 30 hours. And all of a sudden, everything just seemed to click for me. And my body just started responding way better. I was hitting better numbers and obviously still had the endurance because I had a great race at Ironman Australia. So it was kind of interesting just knowing that, big volume does work for some people and people have great careers on big volume, but I'm just not one of those people that absorbs it. And I feel like I don't really enjoy training, 30, 32 hours a week. Like it's a long time because that's just training, you've got so much extracurricular stuff. You've got, if you're going to the pool 5 times a week, there's, 20 minutes of the pool each way, 20 minutes back. So there's another few hours there. And then just everything else that you have to do on top. It's like, it's not just training. So, when you are doing those big 30-hour training weeks, it's often more like, 40, 45 hours. So
sure.
It's a big investment. But like I said, it's just not something that has worked for me. And I've actually thrived on kind of less volume and more intensity. And I think that's what kind of led me to a lot of that 70.3 success that I had through 2015 and 16. But then, I'm not trying to say this to everyone. Like volume obviously does work and you do have to do volume, especially for Ironman. Like there's no way around it. You have to do long rides. You have to do big run weeks. You have to do, you have to have that volume and that muscular resilience. But for me, that big, long stuff is just, it just doesn't work.
Yeah. One thing that I really am curious to get your take on is for an athlete who's been in the game for 11 or 12 years and had incredible success, how much do you feel like you can just go back to what you've done previously that has made you strong and just repeat that again versus that's not going to be good enough anymore. I have to evolve, do more volume, do more intensity, take a different approach, implement more of the new technology, whether that's lactate or more, power stuff or more testing or whatever. Like, are you reflecting back on the past? I'm struggling with this a lot on my own right now because, I look back on my career and I'm like, in that year, I was great. Let's just do that again.
Yep.
But I don't know if it applies in 2025. What's your take?
Yeah, I don't know. It's funny, when I was in my mid-20s, even late 20s, I wouldn't even count. Like I would barely upload my sessions into Training Peaks or whatever, But now it's like, now that I'm 34 and I'm kind of, coming towards the end of my career, I'm like all of a sudden obsessed with everything going green in Training Peaks, obsessed with seeing, my CTL and my total hours. And it's just funny how, I never used to care about that. Someone would ask me, how much do you swim a week or ride or run a week? And I'd be like, I don't know. But now if you ask me, I could, tell you exactly almost to the kilometer. But yeah, I think every year you build layers, and what worked, 5-6 years ago might not work now because you're a different person. The sport's different. The sport's changed, I have looked back at past training and have compared a little bit, but then I've also gone back and been like, I never would have been able to run, 2 hours at 4-minute kilometer pace, 6-7 years ago when I was training for 70.3s. But now I could go bang that out in an Ironman build. But I also look back at I do 6 by 1K and I was doing, sub 3 minutes, and I'd be like, I can't do that now that I'm focusing on Ironman. It's like, it's totally different, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. It's also one of those things where, you mentioned you tried to do the 30-hour weeks. And I think at least I am, and in 2025, I think we're just inundated by what other people are doing. 10 years ago, that wasn't really the case. So you could get your plan, you could execute it, you could be like, oh, wow, like I'm doing great. I'm making progress. And, you know, if you were running 3 10Ks 2 months ago and now you're running 3-minute Ks, you see that improvement.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, and so maybe it's just an addition. It's not always addition by addition. It's addition by subtraction now.
And I also think that, you know, a lot of people might add 10% onto their, you know, what you hear somebody say they do, just take 10% off it. And that's probably more like the number.
Yeah. How much are you paying attention to like what the big dogs are doing on social media, and how much are you paying attention to like what people are doing in town?
I think when I was younger, I used to pay a lot more attention to it. Now I'm just like, yeah, I try not to look at it too much. I actually don't really follow too much of other athletes' training and things like that. You know, I don't really watch any of the YouTube channels or anything like that. Like sometimes I will if I'm on the trainer, but yeah, like I don't actively seek it out, but I'm not trying to block it out, if that makes sense. Like I'll scroll on Strava and I'll see, oh, you know, Justin did a 3-hour ride at, you know, it's good power. But then I just carry on and, you know, I don't be like, oh, you know, it doesn't send me, you know, down a spiral or anything.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I've had a lot of guests, you know, in-town guests here, you know, Rudy and whatever. And I think a lot of people have a similar thing because what matters at the end of the day, and I think the thing we all respect is like, what did you do in the race?
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, it's all good and well to post a really sick 6-hour ride.
Yeah.
But if you go to the race and walk, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. I just mainly like Strava because if you do a long ride, you can see a nice big, you know, a nice big loop. It looks quite pleasing.
I'm with you on that as well. Like, oh man, if you do like a nice big Thompson loop or you do like the St. Vrain loop, it just looks nice and pretty.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So I guess like one thing that I want to touch in on a little bit more is you mentioned it a couple times, like just the general competitiveness of the sport, like post-COVID. I think we're all feeling that. It's harder to get results. It's harder to get sponsors. Like it's just a completely different game now. You know, looking at that time between like 2020 and 2023, there were glimpses of what you were delivering in terms of results from that 2015 to 2019 period, but you weren't getting 1570.3s during that phase. Like, was there something that you could pinpoint in your training or your life that prevented you from getting those wins, or was it just a matter of like the sport elevates?
I think there was a couple. So 2022, we had the birth of Toby, our son, kind of 6 weeks before Kona. And I also dealt with COVID through that summer, and it just, you know, knocked me for 6. I just never kind of really got over it until I actually took like 2 months completely off after Kona. So that was kind of a whirlwind and a bit of a write-off year, 2022. But I think, you know, through COVID, a lot of the young guys were so motivated and, you know, there was no races and they were just like, we're going to go out and we're going to train really hard. Whereas I was kind of the opposite. I was like, oh, this is kind of nice. You know, I can not do any training. I can put on a bit of weight. I can drink beer and not feel bad about it and things like that. And I think, you know, I'm not saying that was the cause because I think, you know, having time off and getting some hormonal replenishment is quite good. But I think quite a few athletes really, you know, I look at someone like Sam Long and I think he really used that time quite well and he was motivated and he trained really hard and he came through the other side and he was, you know, one of the best athletes in the world. And I'm not saying that that's where I dropped the ball, but I think, you know, those younger motivated guys use that time to get really strong. And some of us older ones were kind of resting on our laurels maybe a little bit. And yeah, I guess I fall into that category of resting on my laurels. But, you know, that's one kind of hypothesis that I've had. But just also, yeah, I mean, I've touched on it, just the sport. Everyone's really good now. The sport's growing. We're getting so much more influx. Like, I think one thing, kind of back to your earlier question where you said, you know, why did I have so much success at 70.3s? I think, you know, I was one of the early guys that came from ITU into 70.3s, whereas now you're getting young kids that are training specifically for Kona. You know, it's not like 70.3 and Ironman are no longer like the post-ITU career. It's like, no, I want to race Kona. I'm a 17-year-old kid. I'm training for Kona, and I think, you see that's why there's so many good young guys now, Sam Laidlow and stuff. Like, they've never really looked at that ITU stuff, and it's, long course hasn't been like a second career for them. It's been their focus.
Yeah. And where are you at now? I think, are you comparing yourself to the Sam Laidlows and these 25-year-old guys who immediately come in and are Ironman world champion? Or like, what's your perspective for where you're at in your career at this point?
For me, I've always, like, winning is great. I love winning. Everyone loves winning. Everyone loves podiums. But I've always been more of I want to be the best athlete I can be and try not to look or, what other people do is out of my control. So I try and really focus on, what's going to get me the best results, and whatever that result is, what it is. And I think now, as I'm quite a bit older, I'm also, I very rarely go into a race with a position or a finish place in my mind. It's always like, how do I execute the best race? And that's what gives me satisfaction. And, whatever place that is, if I execute a great race and get 7th, then great. That's all I could do, and I can't be disappointed. And I think, while obviously, it's nice to win, and I'd love to have a world title like Sam Laidlow, but, you also got to just, I think, focus on yourself and, be the best athlete that you can be.
Yeah. And I think when you look back on your career, at least, I've done this a long time, you've done this a long time, you probably look back more on the experiences and knowing that you kind of gave it your best rather than like, it's nice to look back and say, I won that one, I won that one.
But, for sure. I mean, some of my best race experiences aren't wins, some of those 70.3 Worlds races. I actually think I got 9th in 2019 in Nice, and I look back on that race with so much fondness because I feel like I had a great race, but I got 9th. It's on paper it doesn't look good, but I feel like I executed a really good race, and I was really happy.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing, I mean, a big piece of 2024 was you winning Ironman Australia. You alluded to that earlier. I'm curious to hear your perspective on the differences in racing in Australia versus racing in America, and maybe if you feel any pressure like to go back to Australia and race at home.
I wouldn't say I feel pressure. I do have Australian sponsors that I want to keep happy and race in Australia for them. But, going home and racing in Australia is important to me. I've got family, I've got friends, sponsors that like to see me do well there. But it's never been like, I have to go back to Australia. It's like, awesome. I'm going to, I look at the calendar. I'm like, I'm going to do Ironman Australia this year, and that's going to be one of my A races. It's never like a burden, so to speak, besides the travel a little bit. But, once I'm there, it's good. But, I mean, I love racing in Australia, and I think, that's just the nature of an Australian living in the US. I think it's important to my family, and that Ironman Australia race is in a town called Port Macquarie. It's where my mum lives. So my dad drove up from Sydney. I had my brother there and my mum, and it was really special having them watch me race because we race so much internationally that, often we're actually going to races by ourselves and we've got no one out on course. So, to have a really good race there and have my mum at the finish line, it was really emotional, but
That's cool. I mean, that's like a day where it all comes together. That's probably like what makes all the bad times. It is what makes all the bad times worth it.
Yeah, I think so. And that race, Ironman Australia, was almost like the culmination of, I'd been focusing on Ironman kind of more specifically than 70.3s for 2 or 3 years at that point. And I feel like I'd never really done a good one. So I felt like that was the one that I'd been training for like 3 years, and to execute that and have a great day, it makes those 3 years worth it.
Yeah, that's cool. I guess like one thing I was looking back on your career and looking through all of your results, like you've done a lot of races. And you mentioned, we race internationally, we race all over the world. And I'm curious, if you take away like the prize money, the sponsor bonuses, and like pressure to race in certain areas or whatever, what is your ideal race schedule if you had to pick like 4 or 5 races simply based off like coolness and location?
So you want me to pick 4 locations?
Yeah, pick 4 races that you've done in your career where you're like, okay, those are the 4 that I'm really down with. Or it could be races that you haven't done yet that you really would like to do.
So I definitely want to do Roth one year. I think that's, on a lot of people's, kind of bucket list races. And maybe one of those adventure Ironmans like Patagonia Man or something. I think that looks really cool. But I mean, in terms of some of the best races that I've done, that Nice race was really cool, like riding up that mountain. It was, it sounds a bit cliche, but it did feel like you were in the Tour de France a little bit. A lot of I haven't raced in Europe a lot, but yeah, European towns are just so much different to US and Australia that it's kind of, it's really cool getting that different culture. In terms of here in the US, there used to be a race called Vineman, which I think was, one of the best races around. And I don't know, it was just, such a cool race. You swam in this tiny little river that was, sometimes was too shallow to swim in. You had to get up and like porpoise or, some taller people like you could probably like wade or run through it. And you ran around this vineyard and things. Yeah, it was a really cool race. I was really sad when that one kind of shut up shop. And I think St. George is another one that's a really special race. Just that, just the scenery on that course is amazing. It's a shame that one's going away as well this year. But, we cross our fingers that races come and go. Like, I think this year on the calendar, there's a few races that haven't been a pro race for quite a long time. So, yeah, I think it, ebbs and flows a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I have vivid memories of St. George. I can't remember what year it is, but you and I both not having our best day.
Yeah,
like riding on Snow Canyon Parkway together, looking at each other like, ooh, this isn't super fun right now.
Yeah, I do remember that. I don't know why I had such a bad day.
You, me, and Ben Canute. I remember the three of us. We're just like trying to get up Snow Canyon as best as possible, being like, oh man, this is not going well.
Yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah, good times. All right, well, I've got a couple mindset questions here. I think, all of us who are at this point in our career are starting to feel 10 years of professional sport on the mind and on the body a bit. Like, what are you doing to stay motivated these days?
I think the shift into Ironman, the last few years has really kind of sparked my joy again and the desire to improve. It's been like a new challenge because I raced exclusive 70.3s for, 6-7 years. It was quite a long time. And I did wait quite a while to go into Ironman. Like I did one in 2019, kind of at the end of the year as a bit of a, I'll just try one out. But it wasn't until really 2022 that I kind of started training with earnest for Ironman. So that's been kind of really motivating because like I said before in one of my questions, like running 30K, in a long run 5-6 years ago would have been like, oh, that's so far. But now it's like, seeing that improvement has been quite rewarding in Ironman, and that's been really fun. And then, like I said, winning Ironman Australia and seeing that improvement kind of play out in a race has been really motivating. But I think I'm still enjoying it. I still love training most of the time. I think anyone that says they love training all the time is lying. But I'm still having fun. I love the lifestyle, and I still have that drive to kind of get better, and I still think that I do have, my best Ironman is still ahead of me, so that's kind of motivating as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you someone who needs balance, or do you feel like you can have triathlon be your identity and sort of what you're doing 24/7?
No, I definitely need balance. I feel like triathlon, for better or worse, is my identity a little bit. And, it is, I think, something that all professional athletes might struggle with from time to time. But, I'm just getting back into training. Like I had no problem, since Kona doing absolutely nothing for, I think it was about 6 weeks. And it was, then it was a couple of weeks of 10, 12-hour weeks, and now I'm finally back into the swing of things. So I've got no problem shutting up shop for a little bit and having some time off. But I definitely do like balance, like social life and things like that, whether that's just with, Sarah and Toby and things like that. Like I'm not going out partying, but, we like to spend time with the family and friends. And I try not to let triathlon become all-consuming because I don't think that's a healthy relationship. Like there is times where you do have to be really strict, and obviously through the season or training for a big race, there is times when it is, kind of all systems go and it's all revolved around, training and performing. But yeah, that's why it is nice at the end of the season to shut up shop and kind of, almost give back to the family and things like that. And, the time is more about them than it is about me, because I know, when the season comes back around, it is, it does come around quick, and it can be, full on, especially for, my wife and things like that, who has to deal with my mood swings and training up and downs and everything. So
yeah, not easy, not easy.
No.
I think with training and a family, that's probably the majority of your time. But even in peak season, are there things that you're trying to carve out every day to step back and do different types of stuff, or is it full on?
During season, mainly full on, I would say. The stuff that I'm doing to kind of unwind is, maybe watching TV or playing video games or something if I can fit it in. But generally I've got my hands pretty full with training and family life and things like that. So
yeah. Do you ever grapple with the fact that you're probably, even if your best performance is still ahead, do you grapple with the fact that you're probably on the back nine?
Yeah, absolutely. Every the last few years, I feel like it's, and I do feel like, my best Ironman is ahead of me. But that doesn't always mean that that's going to happen. You know what I mean? I still feel like I do have more to give in the Ironman, but, to lay down a really great Ironman performance, a lot of stars have to align. You have to not get sick, you have to have mechanical luck, you have to feel good, and there's a lot of things that go into a performance. And I definitely do grapple with the fact that while I am only 34 and 15, 20 years ago people were just starting their Ironman career, but now it's like I looked at the start list for Kona, and I was definitely in that that top third of older athletes, and I was like, man, when did that happen? It's like, it felt like a year ago that I came here to Colorado, but it was 10.
Yeah.
But there is those anxieties and little thoughts that you have about being kind of in your twilight. And I think that goes back to why now I am quite obsessed with seeing all the training go green and making sure that every Ironman build race build, a race is going really well, because you don't know how many more you're going to have.
Yeah. Do you feel like your peak performance, if it does lie ahead of you, lies in a world championship event or in a different type of race, like an Ironman Australia or a regional championship?
Yeah, I've done Kona twice, and I feel like, last year, 2024, wasn't disastrous from a numbers perspective. 20 seconds, not great on paper, but I actually felt like it wasn't, besides the run, it was quite a okay performance, swim and bike wise. But I just think, Kona's or World Championships just such a different beast. Like every other Ironman, you're like, all right, these are my numbers. This is what I can hold. This is what I know I can ride for 180K, and this is what I know I can run. But at Kona, it's like you don't have really that luxury of just like settling into your rhythm. It's like you're just getting the power and the pace dictated to you, and you just hope that you can hold on. And, that's why it makes it so different than any other Ironman. I'm not sure. I think I do definitely would love to get back to Kona in 2026. But it's hard to say where my best performance will lie. I think, I definitely think I can do a lot better in Kona than I did last year in 2024. So yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess what does come post triathlon? Are you even having those thoughts yet, or is it just head down until that moment happens?
No, I have thoughts, a lot of them pipe dreams, but, I'm like, that'll be cool to do this job or something. But, I would love to kind of stay in the endurance sport, community. I'd love to stay involved in triathlon in some form or fashion. I don't know what that would be. I do actually coach about 10 athletes, which I really enjoy. Just kind of giving back a little bit, and I find that really fun. So maybe that's something I could scale up a little bit, or I don't know. I'd love to work with one of my sponsors or something. Maybe transition from an athlete role into something else within a company. But never really sat down and, I've had thoughts or something will drift into my mind and I'm like, oh, that'll be cool. And then I Google it and I'm like, oh, there's no way.
Yeah, I'm very similar. I would like sit on the couch with Jeannie in the evenings and be like, oh, what if we did this or what if we did that? Yeah, no, we'll kick that to a year down the line or whatever.
or you realize that, you need a 4-year, computer science degree or something. You're like, oh, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you and Sarah think about your future in terms of staying in Boulder? Do you want to go back to Australia at some point? What do you think?
We've thought about relocating back to Australia, and I'd love to do that at one point, but I've always said that, before Toby starts school, we would try it for a couple of years, but he's already 2.5 and, he's starting preschool soon and, time just goes. And, Sarah's got a good job. Her family lives in Denver, so she's really close with her family. So it would definitely be a big change for us. But we have spoken about it and we're definitely open to the idea. But nothing, we haven't made any plans or anything like that. We've just kind of thrown it out there and be like, oh yeah, that would be fun. But, when you start thinking of all the everything that goes into relocating a family to another country, it's quite a lot. Like, when I came here, I just had a suitcase and my bike and, but now I've got, so much more stuff. Like bringing that all back to Australia, I wouldn't even know where to start.
I know. We have the same conversations about going to South Africa where my wife is from and it's just, Australia and South Africa are two of the furthest places away from Colorado.
Yeah. So far. And it's a complete, just lifestyle change. And I would love to try it one day, but, probably not within the next couple of years. I'd say it would be something, post-career that we would try.
Cool. Is there a result or performance that you could see yourself having that you could just walk away on, kind of like how Jan won that PTO race and he just like dropped the mic and went out? Or is there anything like that you could see happening? Or do you want to kind of have an exit strategy, maybe like Sebi did and say, okay, this is my exit plan?
Oh, yeah. Sebi announced his retirement like 2 years in advance or something.
I think it was like 5.
And then you have other people that just never announce retirement, they just kind of drift off. I would love to win another Ironman. I don't know what Ironman that would be, but I'd be really satisfied with. But even if I don't, like even if I was to, if something happened and I could never race again from now, I would still look back at my career with, being really proud and really happy and achieved a lot more than I ever set out to do, really, and ever thought that I would. So, there's nothing that I feel like I'm missing. Obviously I'd, love to win a world title or something, but that's not like something that, well, I guess I am chasing it in some respect, but it's not like, oh, I'm going to do that before I retire. It's like, yeah.
Yeah. I think if you're coming from a place of pride and gratitude for what you've done, then it's really all to play for. Mm-hmm. And maybe your best performance of your career still lies ahead because of that sort of approach and mindset. So
yeah, it often happens as well when you are a little bit more, you're not hyper focused on a result that, because sometimes that can derail the actual result. It's kind of, some of the best races that I've had are the ones where, you have a little bit less pressure or you don't think it's going to go as well. And it, you take that pressure off yourself and then you go out and you do perform.
Yeah. You got to kind of tread that line between like contentment and commitment.
Yeah.
Where it's all right, I'm content, but I got to commit to the goal.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not saying, don't give a stuff about the race, but sometimes, and I've definitely been on the other side where you've been way too, anxious leading into a race, and I think definitely there's that optimum arousal that you need to have of, not too much, but definitely a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, before we wrap up, I've got some rapid fire questions for you. Ready to roll?
Yep.
All right, number 1, what's the best advice you've received in your career?
It's hard to beat someone who never gives up.
Nice. You have to delete one from the earth: beer, coffee, or precision carbon electrolyte mix.
Precision's gone.
Oh, man, dude, you're getting fired. You just re-signed your contract, I think.
No, probably beer.
He has to say that.
I do love beer, but as an athlete, it doesn't really fit in with the lifestyle, does it?
Yeah. All right, best part about being a dad and the worst part?
The best part is just seeing, a little human develop in front of your eyes, and the other day, this is kind of not rapid fire, but I'll tell the story anyway. He was riding his Strider bike, and I was riding next to him on the mountain bike, and I went down this ditch and then, did a little jump, and I saw Toby look so excited, and he goes, "Dada, me?" He wanted to try. And I could see the fear in his eyes. Like I could see how scared he was, but he did it anyway.
That's awesome.
And he went down and he did it, and it was just beautiful.
That's cool. That's very cool.
And
Turn away, don't watch me cry.
Yeah. And the worst part, he's in this phase where when he's mad, he'll bite us. So currently that's the worst part. If you pick him up and he's mad, he'll try and bite your face or something.
Can he break skin?
Oh yeah, I had this cut. It was actually from a scratch. I had this cut under my eye that drew blood from his one of his tantrums the other day.
Maybe he's gonna have to get into wrestling or something.
Yeah.
All right, bike with a top tube or without a top tube?
Well, the last couple of years has been without, but that might change for 2025.
That would make sense.
But still in the same family.
Cool. Would you rather do a 2-hour triathlon-related Instagram live or live stream yourself playing a video game for 4 hours?
Oh, I'd play a video game for 4 hours, because then if I have to do it, then I get to play a video game for 4 hours.
All right, so that one's easy.
Instead of 20 minutes before after Toby goes to bed, and then I'm like, I'm going to bed too. I'm too tired.
Yeah, totally. All right, who is the most overrated triathlete of all time and the most underrated?
I'm going to throw some shade at someone.
Yeah, I'm putting you on the spot.
The most overrated triathlete of all time. I'm trying to dig back into the memory bank. Someone that's a bit older that probably won't listen to this, maybe.
Yeah.
The most.
You can do underrated if you just want to pick underrated.
Most underrated triathlete. Who would that be? I mean, recently, maybe someone like Leon Chevalier. I know he's, he had a great race at Kona, but
That's an exceptional answer.
yeah, I feel like he doesn't really get his just desserts.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we'll go with Leon.
All right.
And then I'm not offending anyone by saying overrated.
All right. I'm gonna ask him off the pod and then post it on Instagram. All right. Final one. What is a pocket IPA?
Oh, so I went to a friend. They had a Christmas party the other night, and we were playing ping pong. And I was drinking a beer, and then I finished it, and then I had another one in my pocket, so I just pulled it out of my pocket.
That's a pro move.
Yeah, people were like, "Wait, where did that come from?" And it was just in my pocket.
Yeah, that was an audience question.
Not a deep, nothing too fun.
All right. Well, cool. Appreciate you coming on the podcast, Sam.
Yeah, of course.
It was a pleasure
It was fun.
catching up.
Yeah, thanks, man.
All right, of course. See you in the next episode. Peace.